Hi, I'm Sarah Beall,
I'm Glastellar.
and we're here to talk to you about our show, The Figure in Passing.
Yeah. So starting off, we're in the second room of the gallery where Sarah's work has been installed. Sarah's pieces are, as you can see, mostly dealing with the color red. She captures these fleeting moments and then archives and explores and reflects upon that moment and lengthens that moment through the painting of these pieces, through abstracting the form, and through layering. So to start off, would you like to talk about the process in which you get inspiration for these pieces?
Yeah, it's a combination of more intuitive style, just abstract painting, and portraiture that I base off of pictures that I take of strangers for the most part. I've used a combination of found imagery in the past, as well as, it started off really just taking pictures of people that I knew and painting them without permission, and then led into found imagery, and I just didn't have a personal connection with it. And ironically, the most personal connection I've been able to forge in my work is some of these pictures of strangers. So my process has been for the last, I guess, 2 years now, walking around and just taking continuous pictures of strangers on the street, and then I come back and I come through them and I pick my little collection of people and I paint them over and over again, and I become these characters in my work. And even though I wouldn't consider my paintings to be strictly portraits, they do incorporate a lot of elements of portraiture. It's like a pretty central theme in the work.
Yeah, you mentioned in talking about your work that it's very voyeuristic, and I think a big repetition kind of word that came up in describing them is that they're really sympathetic, and that every viewer can have their own sort of interpretation of who these figures are and the emotions that they're involved in.
Yeah, that's been one of my favorite parts about making these works, is how people can pick out different things for themselves. They see things in the work and it's oftentimes very different, but it's not right or wrong. Between the really emotional colors and the elements of portraiture, it seems like people can always find something to pick out that they can relate to. So it's been really interesting seeing what they identify in the paintings, but yeah.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite elements in your pieces are their scale. Being hung at eye level, they become really personal interactions, so you're both capturing your moments and your memories and your instances, but when people approach these pieces, they start creating their own.
Yeah, that's one of the most special things, especially with portraiture. Sometimes people ask, like, who would want a picture of this person in their house, and I think because they're so deconstructed and like you said, they're hung on a personal, sort of intimate level, they have an intimate feeling about them, but it's also loose enough and abstract enough to where it could be anything to anyone, you know? Yeah. So it just does add that sort of ambiguity, that mystery, and that big intimacy that people seem to connect to.
A big question that we had from a lot of visitors and viewers is, why red?
Yeah, and that just went back to, the initial inspiration behind the first part of the series, which was just when I was studying in Lacoste through SCAD, I started working in a red ink with these smaller works on paper, and then I would go in with my usual palette. Since most of my paintings do incorporate portraiture, my most natural mixing methods when I mix my paint is to go for my flesh tones and mix those, and seeing like more muted traditional flesh tones that like Roger Walton taught me to do in his class next to that pop of red, just really like the effect of it was it really popped, and the contrast was really nice.
Activated.
So yeah, and just very like alive, and I really loved the look of it, so that whenever I got home and I had access to all of my canvas and paints again, I just was really ready to work with some red. And so it's all about mixing those really fleshy colors and really earthy, muted down colors with a very specific sort of sanguine red. Would you like to go for?
Yeah, along the same path of talking about red, we've also discussed how, despite the intensity of it, it does not reflect the theme of gore.
Yeah.
I think the fact that all of your pieces are red rather than only a few of them makes it so that they do not seem like a shocking and something that just is gory or stands out from the rest of them.
Right, it's not overly aggressive. That was one of my favorite of your observations this weekend, was that since it's consistent, it's not as jarring, you know? Yeah, since it's all next to each other and it's being used in a lot of different ways and they're all playing off of each other. But it does have a softer, more sympathetic effect, even though I do think they are more highly emotional and a little mysterious. That. Another thing that we talked about a lot this weekend, like between both of our work, was the process of making these.
Yes.
And just sort of working in layers and how all of that worked, which was really fun to talk about. It was really cool to talk about process with everyone that came by, because we both start with really transparent layers, but so differently, because you work on wood panels that are just much larger in scale and really beautiful and so different than mine. Besides that, our work is connected through being, they're both abstract and they have figurative elements and a lot of drippy acrylic layers, but we take them in very different directions, which is something that we really had to consider whenever we were putting this show together. But like for me, I work on, you know, a smaller, more consistent scale, usually on canvas, stretched canvas, and I start off with my really transparent acrylics, and then I build up to more thick texturized layers and finish off with oils, whereas yours are, they maintain that really, it's not thick, because they don't look thin, they're very, how do you describe your work?
The colors are a lot more subdued, I think, and the pattern also takes on its own form within the piece. And kind of as a tie-in, we both were discussing substrates, and we had a lot of questions asking where you were going from here on out. Are you going to come back to this series, touch upon it again? You mentioned that you're going to explore using other colors instead of red, still sticking with red, but
yeah, I mean, I don't think I'll be able to shake the red. I am who I am, but I am really excited to kind of move a little bit away from this series of work that I've been doing. So I've been making these for a couple of years now, and I mean, I just really fell in love with abstract painting, and I've really enjoyed my time spent with it, but I feel like I've gleaned a lot of inspiration and some experience through making these that has sort of pushed me into, like, I don't know, a new direction I'd like to go into. And I still would like to work with strangers and even still predominantly a lot of the same characters that I've been working with in my paintings. But something that we talked about was, even though these paintings aren't so much about the subjects when it comes down to it in the actual paintings, they are an important part of the process for me. And as I'm working on them and I'm looking at these people over and over again, I do sort of start to build these narratives without really even thinking about it, of who these people are to me. And they're oddly specific and mundane, and so I really would like to make some that are sort of just putting them in these narrative scenes a little bit in the future, potentially at a larger scale, and experimenting with some different color palettes. Not anything crazy, but like maybe just a little bit less red and a little bit more everything else, and as well as delving into another series based more so on memory, because that's also another direction that sort of used to be more of my work that before I took this turn, because previously, before I found I don't know, before I got in the swing of things, got in the groove with these paintings, I spent a long time trying to figure out how to convey memory in my paintings. And I've been using photographs in a way that my paintings weren't really giving what I wanted them to be giving, and it really felt to me and others that observed them like it was more referencing photography than anything else. And a lot of times they were goofy, which is fine. I'll do some funny paintings again, but I would also really like to delve into making paintings that more successfully reference memories of mine and these moments that I look back and now consider to be really integral moments that got me to where I am today.
Yeah. Thank you so much for talking about your work, and I'm so excited to see where it goes.
You too. This has been so fun. Talking about memories, do you want to start about talking about your work?
Yeah, so my pieces are labeled, many of them start with memory 1, 2, 3, and 4, and those were the really beginning steps and foundations into this series of work. And my work really deals with my diagnosis with PTSD, and then exploring these memories or traumatic moments and symptoms of trauma through painting really helps me process those moments again.
Yeah.
Thinking back on those things that have passed and then archiving them and lengthening them and exploring them again.
Yeah, and taking that and then expanding it, something that we talked about, like sort of prolonging that moment, taking it with you in your studio and just sort of getting to reflect on it. Do you think that when you bring up, it's interesting that just trauma, PTSD, do you think that the use of repetition in your work has something to do with that?
Yeah, a great question that I got from viewers is that where did the repetition come from? So while recovering from a lot of mental trauma and some days being really bad, not being able to get out of bed, I did a lot of repetitive activities. So convalescence is this word that really describes an activity that you can do while healing, in the process of healing. And for me, it was crochet. So doing the repetitive movement of making and the physical aspect of making is really something that I have learned to bring into my work, both visually through repetition, but also creating the large scale panels, which I built myself. And then the act of painting large scale is also very repetitive and physical. So
that's so true. Even just the scale of it makes it a little bit more repetitive.
Yeah.
And the patterns, when you look at the patterns that you recreate in the work, you can just, it's definitely something that you can just see looking at it. And it's so strong. It's such a strong point looking at your paintings, you know?
They also go and reference the passing of time and how that obscures memory. So kind of like the way you redact information, those marks are the obscuring of those recognizable images, and the whole piece, those take on their own.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And you can even see that, you can see it in the paintings, obviously, and like those ideas translate so well. And that's one of my favorite things about your work, is the fact that I think it's just aesthetically really beautiful. And I appreciate, of course, that you build your own panels. That just, the craftsmanship is really impressive. But the fact that it also transfers it into your ceramics, that idea translates to that. It's really beautiful, the continuity of it.
Yeah, being able to take a ceramic surface design this quarter has really influenced and helped me along this journey of transitioning from painting to ceramics, which also going into the repetitive movement of throwing, pulling up the clay and moving it in this repetitive motion ties back to the kind of origin and influence and inspiration that I got for the paintings, and then being able to transition from painting acrylic on ceramics to doing the whole process with ceramic techniques. That was something that was very special and educational for me during this process.
Yeah, I think that was one of my favorite things that we talked about this weekend that I learned about your work even during the show, was that because I'd seen that you transferred your painting techniques that you use on your large panels onto your ceramics, but I hadn't realized that you had to adapt your technique so much, and that you not only that you can see the crossover and how you like brought it into the work, which I think is really beautiful, but also that you brought your painting techniques over, and then you made another one that was just pure ceramics techniques, and it's all the continuity. It's just really great. I think it's amazing.
I'm also really excited to keep exploring this aspect of function that I have with the ceramic vessels. Ceramics is something that has a very long history, and traditionally is very functional and utilitarian, and trauma and mental health issues are things that really interrupt function for people, and especially for me. And so wanting to have that conceptually tie into the visuals is very important.
Absolutely. I think that's so interesting. And also with your ceramics, how you create these, would you call them tears, or what would you call them?
They're cuts. And it really started with seeing what I could do to the form in a way that would change how it's used or perceived, but without completely breaking it. I've had a lot of suggestions on potentially breaking the ceramic pieces, but that seems too intense and full of angst for my experience and a lot of people's experience with trauma. It's not always a very intense and violent experience. There's a lot of stillness and waiting and time that is involved with healing and experiencing all the different facets of it. And so it was very important to me that they retain their shape. And
no, I think the cuts translate that idea really well, and I hadn't even made that connection that how well that concept of time and history also translates into your ceramics. So we see that in the paintings with the layers and the memories, and they feel like memories. Even because we were in class together when you painted these, so I got to see them kind of growing in the critiques, and at every part of it felt like a memory when you're looking at it.
And we also talked about being able to see all of our pieces in a well-lit and professional setting, being able to see how they have evolved and how they influence each other and visually.
Yeah, it's been so interesting just seeing the coming out of COVID after 2 years, and after seeing everyone's work on predominantly through Zoom and online, getting to see things not only just in person, but in a beautiful professional environment that we put together ourselves. It's just been really like rewarding and just
very fulfilling.
I
remember having my perception of some of your pieces completely change after seeing them in person.
I'll always
falling in love with them again.
Thank you. Same, like just the scale of yours like really shook me. I don't know why, just because they're so large to me, like just compared to most of our work as students, they really have a presence and a scale that it just doesn't translate through online mediums unless you have something really referencing the scale. It's difficult to see, but it's been so amazing seeing them in this environment. Even the way that we laid it out in this room. We want to talk about how we curated our exhibition.
We can talk a little bit about Puget Gallery. So Puget Gallery is a migratory gallery that I started in the midst of COVID as a way to create an online platform for emerging artists and students. I was seeing how myself and others were really struggling during the transition from physical to digital during the pandemic, and it was really important to me to create some platform to support others and myself.
It's definitely really important.
And being a migratory gallery, it's been really flexible and straightforward it just made sense to set up this space here. We talked a lot about how important it is for us to make fine arts accessible and seem welcoming to audiences that may not be so familiar with the world of fine arts. And I think that really worked well with the space that we chose.
Yeah, I agree. It was, because it's got the perfect Savannah Victorian feel with the architecture, but it did feel really homey. I think part of that, do you think, besides we installed a cat door that really brought some homey touches, there are lots of really just homey touches to our show, as well as really professional aspects of it.
It was important to remain professional, but not be so cold and unwelcoming.
Yeah, it was very inviting.
It's great working with you, and it's
been a blast
for the past 10 weeks, and I'm so happy that we were able to put this together.
Me too.
And thankful to everyone that showed up and provided their support.
We are just so grateful to everyone that not only came to support us during the show, which was incredible, but also amazing friends of help. Catherine, a shout out to Catherine, who helped us with the track lights. Like this beautifully lit room that you see before you is very much thanks to Catherine. And did we want to talk about putting space together a little bit, or the curatorial choices of? So in the first room, when you walk in, there's windows all along, like you'll see in the photos that we put up. But it was a pretty obvious choice for us to put your ceramics in that area. It's funny, I think it's a lot of
it felt very natural.
Yeah, it felt really natural as to where we were going to put our work.
It was we had some great comments from visitors where they noticed that the room that my pieces are in was very flowing, had windows open throughout the show, and the fact that the paintings were staggered and not hung all on the same line made it feel like a very natural and connected experience with the outdoors, which is something that I refer to in my work. And then your pieces feel very homey and cozy and welcoming in this space with the fireplace and mantle, and I think that really adds to the sympathetic and emotional aspect of the pieces.
Yeah, I think that worked out so well. That was one of my favorite comments from one of our viewers, attendees to the show, one of her friends, was that the light, airy feeling of the main room just matched so well with your work, particularly the green, like very airy work that's in the front. And then coming back here and having a more like a warm lit from within sort of feeling with the fireplace. Just those sort of parallels we were really happy to see. I was really pleased with how everything worked out. And I'm excited to see what Puget Gallery does next, and you as well. And
keep an eye out. We'll be doing more exhibitions this year for sure.
Yeah, it's just been such a wonderful experience, and we cannot wait to put on more shows. So yeah, so thank you for stopping by and watching this. It's been a pleasure. Thanks.